Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Chapter 26. Gringotts. Their plans were made, their arrangements whole, in the smallest bedroom. A unmarried lengthy, coarse black hair plucked from the sweater Hermione have been sporting at Malfoy Manor lay curled in a small glass vial on the mantelpiece. "And also you'll be the usage of her actual wand," stated Harry, nodding towards the walnut wand, "so I reckon you'll be quite convincing." Hermione looked apprehensive that the wand may sting or chunk her as she picked it up. "I hate this factor," she said in a low voice. "I sincerely hate it. It feels all wrong, it doesn't work nicely for me. It's like a piece of her." Harry couldn't help but take into account how Hermione had brushed off his loathing of the Blackthorn wand, insisting that he become imagining things whilst it did now not work in addition to his very own, telling him to in reality practice. He selected no longer to repeat her very own recommendation again to her, however, even their attempted assault on Gringotts felt like the incorrect second to antagonize her. "It'll probably assist you get an individual, even though," said Ron. "Assume what that wand's achieved." "But that's my factor," stated Hermione. "This is the wand that tortured Neville's mum and dad, and who knows how many different humans. This is the wand that killed Sirius." Harry had not thought of that. He seemed down at the wand and became visited by way of a brutal urge to snap it, to slice it in half with Gryffindor's sword, which changed into propped against the wall beside him. "I miss my wand," Hermione stated miserably. "I desire Mr. Ollivander could have made me some other one too." Mr. Ollivander had sent Luna a new wand that morning. She was out on the lower back lawn at that second, trying out its talents inside the past due afternoon sun. Dean, who had lost his wand to the Snatchers, changed into watching alternatively gloomily. Harry looked down on the hawthorn wand that had once belonged to Draco Malfoy. He had been amazed, however pleased, to find out that it worked for him as a minimum as well as Hermione's had done. Remembering what Ollivander had told them of the secret workings of wands, Harry notion he knew what Hermione's trouble became. "She had now not won the walnut wand's allegiance by taking it for my part from Bellatrix." The door of the bedroom opened and Griphook entered. Harry reached instinctively for the hilt of the sword and drew it near him, but regretted his movement right away. He ought to tell that the goblin had observed. Searching for to gloss over the sticky second, he stated, "We've simply been checking the ultimate minute stuff, Griphook. We've instructed Bill and Fleur we're leaving day after today, and we've advised them not to rise up to peer us off." They had been company in this factor, due to the fact Hermione might need to transform into Bellatrix earlier than they left, and the much less that Bill and Fleur knew or suspected about what they were about to do, the better. They'd additionally explained that they would now not be returning. As they'd lost Perkins's antique tent on the night that the Snatchers caught them, Bill had lent them any other one. It changed into now packed in the beaded bag, which, Harry changed into inspired to research, Hermione had covered from the Snatchers through the easy expedient of stuffing it down her sock. Although he could pass over Bill, Fleur, Luna, and Dean, not to say the home comforts that they had loved over the previous couple of weeks, Harry was searching forward to escaping the confinement of Shell Cottage. He became bored with looking to make certain that they were now not overheard, uninterested in being close inside the tiny, darkish bedroom. Maximum of all, he longed to be rid of Griphook. However, exactly how and when they were to element from the goblin without handing over Gryffindor's sword remained a query to which Harry had no answer. It were impossible to decide how they had been going to do it, because the goblin rarely left Harry, Ron, and Hermione on my own together for extra than 5 minutes at a time. "He may want to deliver my mother lessons," growled Ron, because the goblin's lengthy fingers saved performing round the rims of doorways. With Bill's warning in mind, Harry couldn't help suspecting that Griphook became at the watch for viable skullduggery. Hermione disapproved so heartily of the deliberate double go that Harry had given up attempting to pick her brains on how great to do it. Ron, at the uncommon events that they were able to clutch some Griphook-free moments, had give you nothing higher than "we'll just have to wing it, mate." Harry slept badly that night time. Lying awake inside the early hours, he returned to the manner he had felt the night time before they'd infiltrated the Ministry of Magic and remembered a determination, nearly in pleasure. Now he become experiencing jolts of anxiety, nagging doubts. He couldn't shake off the fear that it changed into all going to head wrong. He stored telling himself that their plan became true, that Griphook knew what they had been going through, that they have been properly prepared for all the problems they were in all likelihood to encounter, yet still he felt uneasy. Once or twice he heard Ron stir and changed into sure that he too changed into awake. However, they have been sharing the sitting room with Dean, so Harry did now not talk. It became a comfort while 6 o'clock arrived and they could slip out in their dozing luggage, get dressed within the semi-darkness, then creep out into the lawn, wherein they had been to meet Hermione and Griphook. The sunrise become cold, but there has been little wind now that it was May. Additionally, Harry looked up at the stars still glimmering palely inside the dark sky and listened to the ocean washing backward and forward in opposition to the cliff. He turned into going to overlook the sound. Small inexperienced shoots have been forcing their way up via the purple earth of Dobby's grave now. In a year's time the mound might be covered in flora. The white stone that bore the elf's name had already obtained a weathered appearance. He realized now that they may rarely have laid Dobby to rest in a more lovely location. However, Harry ached with sadness to consider leaving him in the back of. Searching down at the grave, he wondered yet again how the elf had known in which to come to rescue them. His fingers moved absent-mindedly to the little pouch nonetheless strung round his neck, through which he ought to experience the jagged reflect fragment in which he have been positive he had visible Dumbledore's eye. Then the sound of a door commencing made him look around. Bellatrix Lestrange was striding across the lawn toward them, followed by using Griphook. As she walked, she became tucking the small, beaded bag into the internal pocket of any other set of the old robes that they had taken from Grimmauld Place. Even though Harry knew perfectly nicely that it became without a doubt Hermione, he could not suppress a shiver of loathing. She became taller than he was, her long black hair rippling down her returned, her heavily lidded eyes disdainful as they rested upon him. However, then she spoke, and he heard Hermione through Bellatrix's low voice. She tasted disgusting, worse than Gertie roots. "Okay, Ron, come right here so I can do you proper, but take into account, I don't like the beard too lengthy." "Oh, for heaven's sake, this isn't about searching good looking, it's now not that, it gets in the way. However, I liked my nostril a bit shorter, attempt to do it the way you did closing time." Hermione sighed and started working, muttering below her breath as she converted diverse aspects of Ron's appearance. He changed into to accept a very fake identity, and that they have been trusting to the malevolent charisma forged by way of Bellatrix to shield him. In the meantime, Harry and Griphook have been to be concealed beneath the invisibility cloak. "There," stated Hermione. "How does he appearance, Harry?" It changed into just viable to figure Ron under his hide, but handiest, Harry concept, because he knew him so nicely. Ron's hair was now long and wavy, he had a thick brown beard and mustache, no freckles, a brief, large nose, and heavy eyebrows. Properly, he's now not my type, however he'll do, said Harry. "We could go, then." All three of them glanced again at Shell Cottage, mendacity darkish and silent under the fading stars, then turned and began to walk in the direction of the factor, simply past the boundary wall, where the Fidelius attraction stopped running and they'd be capable of disapparate. Once past the gate, Griphook spoke. I have to climb up now, Harry Potter, I think. Harry bent down and the goblin clambered onto his again, his arms connected in front of Harry's throat. He was now not heavy, but Harry disliked the sensation of the goblin and the surprising electricity with which he clung on. Hermione pulled the invisibility cloak out of the beaded bag and threw it over them both. Ideal, she said, bending down to check Harry's feet. I will see a issue. Let us pass. Harry turned instantaneous, with Griphook on his shoulders, concentrating with all his may on the leaky cauldron, the inn that turned into the doorway to Diagon Alley. The goblin clung even tighter as they moved into the compressing darkness, and seconds later Harry's foot discovered pavement and he opened his eyes on Charing Pass Street. Muggles bustled beyond wearing the hangdog expressions of early morning, quite unconscious of the little motel's life. The bar of the leaky cauldron turned into almost abandoned. Tom, the stooped and toothless landlord, turned into sharpening glasses behind the bar counter. More than one warlock's having a muttered communique in the Allongway nook glanced at Hermione and Drew returned into the shadows. Madame Lestrange, murmured Tom, and as Hermione surpassed he inclined his head subserviently. True morning, stated Hermione, and as Harry crept beyond, nevertheless carrying Griphook piggyback underneath the cloak, he saw Tom appearance amazed. Too polite, Harry whispered in Hermione's ear as they surpassed out of the resort into the tiny outside. You need to treat human beings like they're scum. Okay, okay. Hermione drew out Bellatrix's wand and tapped a brick within the nondescript wall in front of them. Right away the bricks started out to whirl and spin, a hollow appeared within the center of them, which grew wider and wider, ultimately forming an archway onto the narrow cobbled avenue that was Diagon Alley. It changed into quiet, barely time for the stores to open, and there were hardly any consumers overseas. The crooked, cobbled road was lots altered now from the bustling location Harry had visited earlier than his first time period at Hogwarts such a lot of years before. More stores than ever were boarded up, even though numerous new establishments devoted to the dark arts were created considering that his final visit. Harry's own face glared down at him from posters plastered over many windows, usually captioned with the phrases unwanted primary. Some of ragged human beings sat huddled indoors. He heard them moaning to the few passers-by, pleading for gold, insisting that they were really wizards. One guy had a bloody bandage over his eye. As they set off alongside the street, the beggars glimpsed Hermione. They seemed to soften away before her, drawing hoods over their faces and fleeing as speedy as they might. Hermione taken care of them interestingly, until the man with the bloodied bandage came extraordinary right throughout her direction. My youngsters! He bellowed, pointing at her. His voice changed into cracked, high-pitched, he sounded distraught. Where are my children? What has he achieved with them? You realize, you recognize. I absolutely, stammered Hermione. The man lunged at her, attaining for her throat, then, with a bang and a burst of red light he became thrown backward onto the ground, subconscious. Ron stood there, his wand nevertheless outstretched and a glance of shock visible behind his beard. Faces seemed at the windows on both aspects of the street, at the same time as a little knot of rich searching passers-by gathered their robes approximately them and broke into mild trots, keen to vacate the scene. Their front into Diagon Alley ought to hardly ever had been more conspicuous. For a moment Harry wondered whether it may not be higher to go away now and try to think of an exceptional plan. Before they could move or seek advice from one another, however, they heard a cry from behind them. Why, Madame Lestrange! Harry whirled round and Griphook tightened his preserve around Harry's neck, a tall, thin wizard with a crown of bushy grey hair and an extended, sharp nose turned into striding towards them. It's Treacherous, hissed the goblin into Harry's ear, but at that moment Harry could not think who Treacherous become. Hermione had drawn herself as much as her fullest top and stated with as tons contempt as she may want to muster. "And what do you need?" Trevorse stopped in his tracks, surely affronted. "He's every other dying eater," breathed Griphook, and Harry sidled sideways to repeat the facts into Hermione's ear. "I merely sought to greet you," stated Trevorse coolly, "but if my presence is not welcome—" Harry identified his voice now. Trevorse turned into one of the demise eaters who have been summoned to Xenophilius's house. "No, no, never, Trevorse," said Hermione fast, trying to cowl up her mistake. "How are you?" "Well, I confess I am amazed to peer you out and about, Bellatrix." "Truly, why?" requested Hermione. "Nicely," Trevorse coughed. "I heard that the inhabitants of Malfoy Manor have been restricted to the house, after they, get away." Harry willed Hermione to hold her head. If this became real, and Bellatrix became no longer presupposed to be out in public, "The Darkish Lord forgives those who have served him maximum faithfully within the beyond," stated Hermione in a remarkable imitation of Bellatrix's most contemptuous way. "Possibly your credit score isn't as excellent with him as mine is, Trevorse." Even though the loss of Life Eater regarded indignant, he additionally regarded less suspicious. He glanced down at the man Ron had just bowled over. "How did it offend you?" "It does not be counted, it will no longer achieve this again," stated Hermione coolly. "Some of those wandless may be troublesome," said Trevorse. "Even as they do not anything but beg, I have no objection. However, one among them truly requested me to plead her case at the Ministry Ultimate Week." "I am a witch, sir, I'm a witch, permit me show it to you," he stated in a squeaky impersonation. "As though I used to be going to provide her my wand." "However, whose wand?" stated Trevorse interestingly. "Are you using in the meantime, Bellatrix? I heard that your very own become." "I have my wand right here," stated Hermione coldly, holding up Bellatrix's wand. "I don't realize what rumors you've been taking note of, Trevorse, but you appear regrettably misinformed." Trevorse seemed a little stunned at that, and he became alternatively to Ron. "Who's your pal? I do now not apprehend him." "That is Dragomir Dapart," said Hermione. They'd determined that a fictional foreigner changed into the most secure cover for Ron to count on. "He speaks little or no English, however he is in sympathy with the Dark Lord's goals. He has travelled here from Transylvania to see our new regime." "Certainly. How do you do, Dragomir?" "Ow, you," stated Ron, preserving out his hand. Trevorse prolonged two palms and shook Ron's hand as even though frightened of dirtying himself. "So what brings you and your sympathetic friend to Diagon Alley this early?" requested Trevorse. "I want to visit Gringotts," stated Hermione. "Alas, I also," stated Trevorse. "Gold, filthy gold. We cannot stay without it, but I confess I deplore the necessity of consorting with our long-fingered pals." Harry felt Griphook's clasped hands tighten momentarily round his neck. "Let's," said Trevorse, gesturing Hermione ahead. Hermione had no desire, however, to fall into step beside him and head alongside the crooked, cobbled road towards the location in which the snowy white Gringotts stood towering over the alternative little stores. Ron sloped alongside beside them, and Harry and Griphook followed. A watchful Death Eater was the final factor they needed, and the worst of it become, with Trevorse marching at what he believed to be Bellatrix's aspect, there was no manner for Harry to communicate with Hermione or Ron. All too quickly they arrived on the foot of the marble steps main up to the high-quality bronze doors. As Griphook had already warned them, the liveried goblins who commonly flanked the doorway have been replaced by means of two wizards, each of whom were clutching long thin golden rods. "Ah, probity probes," sighed Trevorse theatrically, "so crude but effective." And he spark off up the steps, nodding left and proper to the wizards, who raised the golden rods and exceeded them up and down his body. The probes, Harry knew, detected spells of concealment and hidden magical objects. Understanding that he had simplest seconds, Harry pointed Draco's wand at each of the guards in turn and murmured, "Conf undo twice." Ignored by way of traverse, who became searching through the bronze doorways at the internal hall, each of the guards gave a touch start as the spells hit them. Hermione's lengthy black hair rippled in the back of her as she climbed the stairs. "One moment, madam," said the guard, elevating his probe. "But you've just executed that," stated Hermione in Bellatrix's commanding, conceited voice. Traverse seemed around, eyebrows raised. The shield was pressured. He stared down at the thin golden probe and then at his associate, who said in a barely dazed voice, "Yeah, you've just checked them, Marius." Hermione swept ahead, Ron with the aid of her side, Harry and Griphook trotting invisibly in the back of them. Harry glanced returned as they crossed the edge, the wizards were each scratching their heads. 2 goblins stood before the inner doorways, which were made from silver and which carried the poem caution of dire retribution to capacity thieves. Harry regarded up at it, and all of a unexpected a knife-sharp memory got here to him, status on this very spot at the day that he had became 11, the most notable birthday of his existence, and Hagrid standing beside him announcing, "Like I said, ye be mad ter strive and rob it." Gringotts had seemed a place of wonder that day, the enchanted repository of a trove of gold he had in no way acknowledged he possessed, and by no means for an instant should he have dreamed that he could go back to Scouseborough. However, inside seconds they had been standing in the full-size marble corridor of the bank. The long counter was manned by means of goblins sitting on high stools, serving the first clients of the day. Hermione, Ron, and Traverse headed in the direction of an vintage goblin who became examining a thick gold coin via an eyeglass. Hermione allowed Traverse to step in advance of her on the pretext of explaining functions of the corridor to Ron. The goblin tossed the coin he became preserving apart, stated to no one specifically, "Leprechaun," and then greeted Traverse, who surpassed over a tiny golden key, which was tested and given return to him. Hermione stepped forward. "Madame Lestrange," stated the goblin, obviously startled. "Dear me! How may additionally I assist you nowadays?" "I wish to go into my vault," stated Hermione. The vintage goblin appeared to balk a little. Harry glanced round. Now not Simplest changed into Traverse placing again, looking, but several different goblins had appeared up from their work to stare at Hermione. "You have identity?" requested the goblin. "Identification? I have never been asked for identity before," stated Hermione. "They understand," whispered Griphook in Harry's ear. "They need to have been warned there might be an impostor." "Your wand will do, madam," stated the goblin. He held out a barely trembling hand, and in a dreadful blast of consciousness Harry knew that the goblins of Gringotts have been conscious that Bellatrix's wand have been stolen. Act now," whispered Griphook in Harry's ear, "the imperious curse." Harry raised the hawthorn wand under the cloak, pointed it on the old goblin, and whispered, for the first time in his lifestyles, "Imperio." A curious sensation shot down Harry's arm, a sense of tingling warmth that regarded to go with the flow from his mind, down the sinews and veins connecting him to the wand and the curse it had simply solid. The goblin took Bellatrix's wand, tested it closely, after which stated, "Ah, you have had a brand new wand made, Madame Lestrange." "What?" stated Hermione. No, that's mine." "A brand new wand," said Traverse, drawing near the counter once more, "nevertheless the goblins all around have been looking." "But how may want to you've got finished, which wand maker did you use?" Harry acted without wondering, pointing his wand at Traverse. He muttered, "Imperio." "Another time." "Oh yes, I see," said Traverse, searching down at Bellatrix's wand. "Yes, very handsome. And is it operating nicely? I usually assume wands require a touch breaking in, don't you?" Hermione regarded wholly bewildered, but to Harry's extensive remedies she conventional the bizarre flip of occasions without comment. The antique goblin at the back of the counter clapped his palms and a more youthful goblin approached. "I shall need the clankers," he instructed the goblin, who dashed away and lower back a moment later with a leather-based bag that regarded to be complete of jangling steel, which he handed to his senior. "Top, correct. So, if you'll comply with me, Madame Lestrange," said the vintage goblin, hopping down off his stool and vanishing from sight, "I shall take you in your vault." He appeared around the stop of the counter, jogging fortunately towards them, the contents of the leather bag nevertheless jingling. Traverse was now standing quite still together with his mouth striking wide open. Ron changed into drawing attention to this atypical phenomenon by regarding Traverse with confusion. "Wait, Bogrod." Any other goblin came scurrying across the counter. "We have commands," he said with a bow to Hermione. "Forgive me, madam, however there had been special orders concerning the vault of Lestrange." He whispered urgently in Bogrod's ear, however the impervious goblin shook him off. "I am aware of the instructions. Madame Lestrange wishes to visit her vault. Very vintage own family, old customers. This way, please." And, nevertheless clanking, he hurried towards one of the many doorways leading off the hall. Harry appeared again at Traverse, who became still rooted to the spot looking abnormally vacant, and made his decision. With a flick of his wand he made Traverse include them, taking walks meekly of their wake as they reached the door and exceeded into the rough stone passageway beyond, which become lit with flaming torches. "We're in trouble, they think," said Harry because the door slammed at the back of them and he pulled off the invisibility cloak. Griphook jumped down from his shoulders. Neither Traverse nor Bogrod showed the slightest wonder at the sudden appearance of Harry Potter of their midst. "They're impervious," he introduced, in response to Hermione and Ron's confused queries. Approximately Traverse and Bogrod, who were each now status their searching clean. "I don't think I did it strongly sufficient, I don't understand." And another memory darted via his mind, of the actual Bellatrix Lestrange shrieking at him when he had first tried to use an unforgivable curse. "You want to mean them, Potter?" "What will we do?" requested Ron. "Let's get out now, while we are able to." "If we will," said Hermione, looking lower back toward the door into the principal corridor, past which who knew what was taking place. "We were given this some distance." "I say we cross on," said Harry. "True," stated Griphook. "So, we want Bogrod to govern the cart, I not have the authority. However there'll not be room for the wizard." Harry pointed his wand at Traverse. "Imperio." The wizard turned and prompted along the darkish tune at a smart pace. "What are you making him do?" "Disguise," said Harry as he pointed his wand at Bogrod, who whistled to summon a little cart that got here trundling along the tracks closer to them out of the darkness. Harry became sure he ought to pay attention, shouting in the back of them inside the fundamental corridor as all of them clambered into it, Bogrod in the front with Griphook, Harry, Ron, and Hermione crammed together within the lower back. With a jerk the cart moved off, collecting speed. They hurtled beyond Traverse, who became wriggling into a crack inside the wall. Then the cart commenced twisting and turning through the labyrinthine passages, sloping downward all of the time. Harry couldn't listen something over the rattling of the cart at the tracks. His hair flew behind him as they swerved between stalactites, flying ever deeper into the earth. However, he saved glancing again. They could as properly have left massive footprints in the back of them. The more he thought about it, the more silly it regarded to have disguised Hermione as Bellatrix, to have added alongside Bellatrix's wand, whilst the Dying Eaters knew who had stolen it. They were deeper than Harry had ever penetrated inside Gringotts. They took a hairpin bend at speed and saw ahead of them, with seconds to spare, a waterfall pounding over the song. Harry heard Griphook shout, "No!" But there was no breaking. They zoomed through it. Water stuffed Harry's eyes and mouth. He couldn't see or breathe. Then, with an awful lurch, the cart flipped over and that they had been all thrown out of it. Harry heard the cart spoil into pieces towards the passage wall, heard Hermione shriek something, and felt himself waft lower back toward the floor as, even though weightless, touched down painlessly on the rocky passage ground. "See cushioning attraction," Hermione spluttered, as Ron pulled her to her foot. However, to Harry's horror, he noticed that she became no longer Bellatrix. Alternatively, she stood there in overlarge robes, sopping wet and absolutely herself. Ron was red-haired and beardless again. They have been understanding it as they checked out every other, feeling their very own faces. "The thief's downfall," said Griphook, clambering to his feet and searching lower back on the deluge onto the tracks, which, Harry knew now, were greater than water. "It washes away all attraction, all magical concealment. They recognize there are impostors in Gringotts. They have got prompt defenses in opposition to us." Harry noticed Hermione checking that she nonetheless had the beaded bag, and hurriedly thrust his very own hand below his jacket to make certain he had no longer lost the invisibility cloak. Then he turned to look Bogrod shaking his head in bewilderment. The thief's downfall regarded to have lifted the imperious curse. "We need him," stated Griphook. "We cannot input the vault without a Gringotts goblin. And we want the clankers." "Imperio," Harry said again. His voice echoed through the stone passage as he felt again the feel of heady manage that flowed from brain to wand. Bogrod submitted all over again to his will, his befuddled expression converting to one among polite indifference, as Ron hurried to pick up the leather-based bag of metallic equipment. "Harry, I assume I'm able to hear human beings coming," stated Hermione, and she pointed Bellatrix's wand at the waterfall and cried, "Protego." They saw the defend appeal spoil the go with the flow of enchanted water as it flew up the passageway. "Suitable wondering," said Harry. "Lead the manner, Griphook." "How are we going to get out once more?" Ron asked as they hurried walking into the darkness after the goblin, Bogrod panting in their wake like an vintage canine. "Allow us worry approximately that once we should," said Harry. He became looking to concentrate. He thought he may want to pay attention something clanking and shifting around nearby. "Griphook, how a lot farther?" "No longer a long way, Harry Potter, not far." And that they grew to become a corner and saw the thing for which Harry were prepared, but which nonetheless delivered they all to a halt. A colossal dragon became tethered to the ground in front of them, barring access to 4 or 5 of the deepest vaults in the area. The beast's scales had become light and flaky at some stage in its lengthy incarceration under the ground. Its eyes have been milkily crimson. Both rear legs bore heavy cuffs from which chains brought about enormous pegs pushed deep into the rocky ground. Its wonderful spiked wings, folded close to its body, might have filled the chamber if it spread them, and while it grew to become its unpleasant head closer to them, it roared with a noise that made the rock tremble, opened its mouth, and spat a jet of fire that sent them walking lower back up the passageway. "It is in part blind," panted Griphook, "but even greater savage for that. But, we've got the manner to control it. It has discovered what to anticipate while the clankers come. Give them to me." Ron surpassed the bag to Griphook, and the goblin pulled out some of small metal units that after shaken made a noisy, ringing noise like miniature hammers on anvils. Griphook passed them out, Bogrod familiar his meekly. You already know what to do, Griphook instructed Harry, Ron, and Hermione. It will assume ache whilst it hears the noise, it will retreat, and Bogrod need to vicinity his palm upon the door of the vault. They superior across the corner again, shaking the clankers, and the noise echoed off the rocky partitions, grossly magnified, in order that the interior of Harry's skull regarded to vibrate with the din. The dragon let loose some other hoarse roar, then retreated. Harry could see it trembling, and as they drew closer he noticed the scars made via vicious slashes throughout its face, and guessed that it had been taught to fear hot swords while it heard the sound of the clankers. Make him press his hand to the door, Griphook advised Harry, who grew to become his wand once more upon Bogrod. The antique goblin obeyed, urgent his palm to the wooden, and the door of the vault melted away to show a cave-like establishing filled from floor to ceiling with golden cash and goblets, silver armor, the skins of unknown creatures, some with long spines, others with drooping wings, potions and jeweled flasks, and a cranium nonetheless wearing a crown. "Search, speedy!" stated Harry as all of them hurried in the vault. He had described Hufflepuff's cup to Ron and Hermione, but if it became the alternative, unknown Horcrux that resided in this vault, he did now not realize what it appeared like. He barely had time to glance around, but, before there has been a muffled clunk from behind them, the door had reappeared, sealing them within the vault, and they had been plunged into total darkness. "Regardless of, Bogrod could be able to launch us," stated Griphook as Ron gave a shout of surprise. "Mild your wands, can't you, and hurry, we've got very little time." "Lumos." Harry shone his lit wand across the vault, its beam fell upon glittering jewels. He noticed the faux sword of Gryffindor mendacity on a high shelf among a jumble of chains. Ron and Hermione had lit their wands too, and were now examining the piles of gadgets surrounding them. "Harry, could this be Arg?" Hermione screamed in ache, and Harry grew to become his wand on her in time to look a jeweled goblet tumbling from her grip. But as it fell, it split, have become a shower of goblets, so that a 2D later, with the top-notch clatter, the floor become blanketed in identical cups rolling in every path, the original impossible to discern amongst them. "It burned me," moaned Hermione, sucking her blistered palms. "They have delivered Gemino and Flagranti curses," stated Griphook. "The whole lot you touch will burn and multiply, however the copies are nugatory, and if you maintain to deal with the treasure, you'll in the end be crushed to loss of life by the weight of expanding gold." Don't touch whatever," stated Harry desperately, but even as he stated it, Ron by accident nudged one of the fallen goblets along with his foot, and 20 greater exploded into being while Ron hopped immediate, part of his shoe burned away via contact with the hot metal. "Stand nonetheless, don't move," said Hermione, clutching at Ron. "Simply go searching," stated Harry. "Don't forget, the cup's small and gold, it's got a badger engraved on it, handles in any other case. See if you may spot Ravenclaw's image everywhere, the eagle." They directed their wands into each corner and crevice, turning cautiously immediately. It became impossible not to comb up in opposition to whatever. Harry dispatched a splendid cascade of faux galleons onto the ground where they joined the goblets, and now there was scarcely room to reach in their foot, and the sparkling gold blazed with heat, in order that the vault felt like a furnace. Harry's wand light handed over shields and goblin-made helmets set on shelves rising to the ceiling. Higher and higher he raised the beam, until it discovered an item that made his heart pass and his hand tremble. "It's there, it's up there!" Ron and Hermione pointed their wands at it too, in order that the little golden cup sparkled in a three-way spotlight, the cup that had belonged to Helga Hufflepuff, which had handed into the possession of Hepzibah Smith, from whom it had been stolen by means of Tom Riddle. And the way the hell are we going to stand up there without touching whatever, requested Ron. Oxio cup! Cried Hermione, who had obviously forgotten in her desperation what Griphook had advised them at some point of their making plans classes. No use, no use! Tousled the goblin. Then what can we do, stated Harry, evident at the goblin. If you want the sword, Griphook, then you'll ought to help us more than wait. Am I able to touch stuff with the sword, Hermione? Deliver it here. Hermione fumbled interior her gowns, drew out the beaded bag, rummaged for some seconds, then removed the shining sword. Harry seized it by its rubied hilt and touched the tip of the blade to a silver flagon nearby, which did now not multiply. If I will simply poke the sword via a manage, but how am I going to get up there? The shelf on which the cup reposed changed into out of attain for any of them, even Ron, who turned into tallest. The heat from the enchanted treasure rose in waves, and sweat ran down Harry's face and back as he struggled to think about a manner up to the cup, after which he heard the dragon roar on the alternative aspect of the vault door, and the sound of clanking developing louder and louder. They have been in reality trapped now. There was no manner out besides through the door, and a horde of goblins appeared to be drawing near on the opposite aspect. Harry checked out Ron and Hermione and noticed terror of their faces. Hermione, stated Harry because the clanking grew louder, I've were given to get up there, we've got to remove it. She raised her wand, pointed it at Harry, and whispered, Levi corpus. Hoisted into the air by means of his ankle, Harry hit a match of armor and replicas burst out of it like white-hot bodies, filling the cramped space. With screams of pain, Ron, Hermione, and the two goblins have been knocked aside into different objects, which additionally started to copy. Half of buried in a growing tide of red warm treasure, they struggled and yelled as Harry thrust the sword through the take care of Hufflepuff's cup, hooking it onto the blade. Impervious! Screeched Hermione in and try and protect herself, Ron, and the goblins from the burning metal. Then the worst scream but made Harry appearance down. Ron and Hermione were waist deep in treasure, suffering to maintain Bogrod from slipping below the growing tide. However, Griphook had sunk out of sight and nothing, however the guidelines of some long fingers were left in view. Harry seized Griphook's fingers and pulled. The burned goblin emerged through tears, howling. Libera corpus! Yelled Harry, and with a crash he and Griphook landed on the floor of the swelling treasure, and the sword flew out of Harry's hand. Get it! Harry yelled, preventing the pain of the recent metal on his pores and skin, as Griphook clambered onto his shoulders once more, determined to keep away from the swelling mass of purple warm items. Wherein the sword it had the cup on it. The clanking on the other facet of the door was developing, deafening. It turned into too overdue. There! It became Griphook who had visible it and Griphook who lunged, and in that immediate Harry knew that the goblin had by no means anticipated them to preserve their phrase. One hand holding tightly to a fistful of Harry's hair, to ensure he did no longer fall into the heaving sea of burning gold, Griphook seized the hilt of the sword and swung it high out of Harry's attain. The tiny golden cup, skewered through the manage at the sword's blade, become flung into the air. The goblin still astride him, Harry dived and caught it, and despite the fact that he may want to experience it scalding his flesh, he did no longer relinquish it, even while countless Hufflepuff cups burst from his fist, dropping rain upon him as the doorway of the vault opened up again and he located himself sliding uncontrollably on an increasing avalanche of fiery gold and silver that bore him, Ron, and Hermione into the outer chamber. Hardly ever aware about the ache from the burns protecting his frame, and still borne alongside on the swell of replicating treasure, Harry shoved the cup into his pocket and reached as much as retrieve the sword, but Griphook become gone. Sliding from Harry's shoulders the instant he could, he had sprinted for canopy among the surrounding goblins, brandishing the sword and crying, "Thieves! Thieves! Help! Thieves! He vanished into the midst of the advancing crowd, all of whom were retaining daggers and who universal him without question. Slipping on the new metallic, Harry struggled to his feet and knew that the best manner out became through. Stupefy! He bellowed, and Ron and Hermione joined in. Jets of red mild flew into the group of goblins, and a few toppled over, but others advanced, and Harry noticed several wizard guards jogging around the corner. The tethered dragon let loose a roar, and a gush of flame flew over the goblins. The wizards fled, doubled up, lower back the way that they had come, and thought, or madness, came to Harry. Pointing his wand on the thick cuffs chaining the beast to the ground, he yelled, "Relatio!" The cuffs broke open with loud bangs. "This way!" Harry yelled, and nonetheless shooting stunning spells on the advancing goblins, he sprinted toward the blind dragon. "Harry, Harry, what are you doing?" cried Hermione. "Stand up, climb up, come on!" The dragon had now not found out that it turned into free. Harry's foot found the criminal of its hind leg and he pulled himself up onto its again. The scales had been difficult as steel, it did no longer even appear to sense him. He stretched out an arm, Hermione hoisted herself up, Ron climbed on in the back of them, and a second later the dragon have become aware that it become untethered. With a roar it reared. Harry dug in his knees, clutching as tightly as he may want to the jagged scales because the wings opened, knocking the shrieking goblins aside like skittles, and it soared into the air. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, flat on its again, scraped towards the ceiling as it dived toward the passage beginning, even as the pursuing goblins hurled daggers that glanced off its flanks. "We'll by no means get out, it's too massive!" Hermione screamed. However, the dragon opened its mouth and belched flame once more, blasting the tunnel, whose flooring and ceiling cracked and crumbled. By way of sheer pressure the dragon clawed and fought its way via Harry's eyes had been closed tight against the heat and dust, deafened by the crashing of rock and the dragon's roars. He could only cling to its again, expecting to be shaken off at any moment. Then he heard Hermione yelling, "Defodio!" She turned into assisting the dragon make bigger the passageway, carving out the ceiling because it struggled upward towards the more energizing air, far from the shrieking and clanking goblins. Harry and Ron copied her, blasting the ceiling aside with more gouging spells. They handed the underground lake, and the extraordinary crawling, snarling beast appeared to experience freedom and space beforehand of it, and in the back of them the passage become full of the dragon's thrashing, spiked tail, of extraordinary lumps of rock, huge fractured stalactites, and the clanking of the goblins regarded to be growing extra muffled, even as ahead, the dragon's fire stored their progress clear. And then at final, via the combined pressure in their spells and the dragon's brute power, they'd blasted their way out of the passage into the marble hallway. Goblins and wizards shrieked and ran for canopy, and subsequently the dragon had room to stretch its wings. Turning its horned head in the direction of the cool outside air it is able to smell beyond the doorway, it took off, and with Harry, Ron, and Hermione still clinging to its lower back, it pressured its manner through the metal doors, leaving them buckled and placing from their hinges, as it staggered into Diagon Alley and released itself into the sky.